When you put people into your life and you're very intentional on them coming into your life to hold you accountable, you're going to be able to get a lot more things done. I had to learn this the hard way though, y'all. I kept trying to think that I could do this by myself. I kept trying to think that I can focus on my revenue generating activities by myself. I kept thinking that I can avoid distractions by myself. When I started putting people in place with the sole purpose of holding me accountable to make sure that I'm doing the right things in my business, that is when things really started to take off for me. What's going on, family? Welcome to the Grind Season Show, where you will discover the mindset, the strategies, and the tactics to be able to build a successful business while being able to be on your grind, but being on your grind the right way. There's no better way to kick off this show than to talk about productivity, because in terms of the grind, that's all about productivity. But I had to learn pretty early on, especially when I jumped into entrepreneurship, that movement does not mean progress. We could seem productive. We could be doing a lot of things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's moving the needle in terms of helping us reach our goals and overall helping us make more money. On top of understanding the power of making the proper progress in terms of the moves that we're making, I also had to learn that when I transitioned to full-time entrepreneurship, I had to learn early on that freedom requires a lot more discipline. Like, a lot of people see that you own a business and the first thing that they say is like, oh, you have a lot of freedom, you own a business. And yes, we do have freedom, but that freedom also comes with big responsibility, right? Because even though we have a ton of freedom, it's not like a 9-to-5 job where, you can kind of go to the 9-to-5 job and kind of BS, right? And still get paid for it. But when it comes to entrepreneurship, you can take advantage of that freedom and you can chill, but you won't make any money. So let me start by just giving you guys a background of how I even learned how important productivity was. And also, I just want to cover the lessons as far as the ways that I was actually not being as productive as I thought I was, even though I was making a lot of moves. And then I also got to talk about when I thought I was being super productive, right? In which I was making a lot of moves, but then I end up burning out and crashing out. And it seems like it was all for nothing. So when I first jumped into entrepreneurship, I had a 6-figure corporate job. I was still working my job and was making a ton of money in my business. And it really came down to me being productive during certain hours of the day. I was very productive from around 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. every day. And then I would also get very productive in the evening as well. But I would say the most productive times were in the morning. And let me tell y'all, a lot of times when I was doing a lot of these things, I could have actually made a lot more money if I was being very intentional on how I was actually spending that time. If I was spending that time more towards things that actually was very important to the business, I probably could have saved myself a ton of time, a ton of effort from doing a lot of things that I probably didn't have no business doing at that beginning stage of entrepreneurship. Then even when I transitioned to full-time entrepreneurship, I immediately started to work 80 to 90 hour week. I was getting it in, and I was so proud of the fact that I was putting these hours in. But then I had to reflect and think wow, I'm putting a lot of hours in, but are they the right hours? I started to realize that I was working more hours, but I wasn't making more money, right? So I started to question myself, am I doing the right things? Because there's no way that I worked more hours this week than I did last week, but I made less money in my business. It's I had to make a big mindset shift, because I had to realize that trading time for money isn't the way to really get wealth. And I actually proved that to myself because I worked more hours and I didn't make more money. If you think about the world in general, there's so many people that work a ton of hours. We see people work 2 jobs, right? They'll work 40 hours at one job, then they'll go to another job and work another 40 hours. And those people tend to not really make a lot of money. They tend to still struggle. It's because they are stuck in this mindset of the more that you work, the more money you make. And that's not necessarily the case. What I had to learn was when it came to productivity, it was really about ways to multiply the output from the inputs that you were putting in. So when you put hours into something, we're so used to having just a straight baseline. Hey, I do this for an hour, I make $30. But what if you change your mindset to say, hey, when I put an hour in, I'm actually multiplying the amount of money and the amount of output that I'm getting from my input. And I really started to feel this when I started to become burnt out. So not only was I working more hours, but I was also burning myself out. So I was working more hours for absolutely no reason. And I always experience this when I would experience these burnouts is I become extremely lazy. And in my mind, it might not be lazy. Maybe it's real burnout. Maybe I need to give my body a rest. But for me, someone who really takes pride in the work that I put in, I felt like I was being lazy, but I couldn't do anything about it because I just didn't have the motivation. I didn't have the momentum that I was really expecting. And it was because I felt like I was wasting my time. So I was going through this constant churn. And I started to study, what is it that other successful business owners do? How are they able to become successful? How are they able to even stay committed when they're going through these struggles? Because honestly, entrepreneurship comes with so many struggles, y'all. So many struggles, and it's very easy to get demotivated and stop. I mean, it's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't last in entrepreneurship is because they go through these cycles where they put in a lot of work and it doesn't seem like they're making any progress. And that's why it's very important to identify the revenue generating activity in your business. So what do I mean when I say revenue generating activity? That's really focusing on the things that you should be doing as a CEO for your business to be able to make money. And one of the first steps that I had to take was I had to figure out where I was spending all my time. So I literally pulled out a sheet of paper and just wrote out where was I spending the most time in the business. And when I did this, I realized I was doing a lot of things that should have been delegated or things that I had no business doing because it didn't really move the needle for the business, but it was still important. The first thing I did was I started to delegate these things to virtual assistants. So what I do is I go to the Philippines and I hire virtual assistants, and I'm able to pay as low as $3 an hour, $5 an hour, $6 an hour, depending on the skill set of the virtual assistant. And I was able to start handing off a lot of these tasks. And when I was able to do that, I started to be able to use more of my time to make more money. Something else that was extremely important, even though I started delegating tasks, I started freeing my time up. But what was I doing with the time that I freed up? It was very important to stay course and make sure that I was doing activity that continued to help my business grow. And it was really important to set boundaries with the people in my life. In order for us to maximize our productivity, we have to make sure we're using our time for things that matter most. And what happens is we get a lot of people that come into our life and they disrupt whatever we have going on that could have been really important for the business. So I had to really put boundaries in place for family, for friends, or even my clients, right? Even the people that I was working with for my business, I had to put boundaries in place because look, if I am spending all this time helping you guys out, if I'm spending all this time answering all the questions that people are hitting me up with, I'm responding to all the family that was hitting me up, it constantly kept me distracted and moved me away from my goals. So something I had to do was really remove distractions and set boundaries. The next thing that I did was I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. If you want to know the hack to be able to make more money, put your phone on Do Not Disturb. The reality is it takes 25 minutes for you to get back on pace when you're working on something. If I'm working on something and I'm really deep in focused work and I get interrupted by a text message, by Facebook, by Instagram, by my team hit me up, it takes 25 minutes on average from proven studies for you to get back on track. Think about how much you are decreasing your productivity when you get distracted, and it takes you 25 minutes to get back to fully focus on what you were working on. Now, the next thing I did, y'all, very, very important. Something that I did was I actually hired an admin that had the responsibility of tracking my time and also being kind of like the gatekeeper between people and myself. When people want to hit me up, they have to go through my assistant, and she's able to vet these conversations. A lot of times she's able to actually forward a lot of those conversations to my other team members, so I'm not the one that even has to handle it. Now, the last hack that I did that also pertains to having an assistant was every single morning that I wake up, I send my assistant a list of the priorities that I have for the day. And this was a complete game changer for me, y'all. When I started to send this over to my assistant and she started to hold me accountable throughout the day to knock out these activities, I started to notice that I was getting a lot more stuff done. And I was able to start making a lot more money while I was doing it. When you put people into your life and you're very intentional on them coming into your life to hold you accountable, you're going to be able to get a lot more things done. I had to learn this the hard way though, y'all. I kept trying to think that I could do this by myself. I kept trying to think that I can focus on my revenue generating activities by myself. I kept thinking that I can avoid distractions by myself. When I started putting people in place with the sole purpose of holding me accountable to make sure that I'm doing the right things in my business, that is when things really started to take off for me. Now understand this, I didn't just like put this stuff in place and it magically started working. I actually had to keep going, had to keep staying committed so that way I can continue to focus on getting this stuff done. What I realized was every time I would catch momentum, I would check back and look at what was I doing that helped me reach this level of success? What was I doing when I made this a successful day? What was I doing when I closed this big sale? What was I doing when I was able to actually produce the right amount of content for the day? And as I kept reflecting on those things, I was creating some really strong habits that really was intentional to get my productivity in order. The other thing I had to realize was this stuff is hard, y'all. It's very hard, especially when you become a full-time entrepreneur, because you have that freedom. There's so many distractions can get in your way. There's going to be times you don't feel like doing anything. But unfortunately, when you're an entrepreneur, if you don't do anything, you don't make money. You don't pay your bills. So you have no choice but to be able to get that level of discipline so that way you can stay focused and get to that next level. And it's very important, y'all. It all starts with just writing it down. Just write down what it is that you want to do. Write down what it is that you do every single day that's distracting you from what you need to do. Because once you acknowledge those things, that's when you're able to take it to the next level and to be able to become a lot more successful in anything that you do in life, not just in business. Maybe it's your 9-to-5 job. Whatever it is, when you write down the things you got to get done and you write down the things that normally distract you from it, you're able to really tackle those things head on and to be able to make a more successful journey for yourself. Understand that this stuff is hard. It's supposed to be hard, because if it's not hard, that means everyone else will be able to do it. That's why everyone lives an average ass life, is because they're not willing to do the stuff that is hard. You have to shift your mindset to understand the value of your time. You become more productive when you realize what your time is meant to be spent on. And it's very easy to get distracted. But again, when you understand that your time is worth $1,000 per hour, which it is, I guarantee you, if you go hard and you really build a business that's able to make money and you really focus on those CEO activities that's really meant to grow your business, that's meant to take it to the next level, the value of your time increases so much that you really don't have time to get distracted. You really don't have time to decide that you want to be lazy for the day. You got to get it in every single day, y'all, and it has to be focused on activity that actually moves the needle in your life and in your business. Not only do you have to get your mindset right, but you got to put systems in place, y'all. Invest in your productivity. If it takes you hiring an admin from the Philippines that might cost you $600 a month and they keep you on pace and they help you tackle your goals, is it worth it? When you think about CEOs of big companies, think about the systems they put in place. Well, CEOs of big companies, they spend $80,000 a year on their admin to come in and manage that CEO schedule. They're investing $80,000 to make sure that their CEO is focused on what they're supposed to do to move the needle for their business. Why aren't you doing the same thing? You got to get the right people around you. You got to get those gatekeepers that's preventing people from coming in and distracting you, right? You got to get the army in place to protect your productivity. Let me ask you guys a question out there. When was the time that you realized that your productivity was being impacted and it was affecting how much dollars you make? When was the time that you sat down and realized, like, wow, I am not as productive as I need to be, and I need to make some changes, because if I'm not, I'm never going to be able to make more money. I'm never going to be able to build a successful business. And when that challenge happened, what did you do about it? I can tell you what most people do about it. What most people do about it is they do nothing and they end up not being able to build the business that they're intended to make. They end up quitting. They end up failing because they never put the systems in place to become productive as an entrepreneur. I challenge you to go be intentional about seeing where you spend your time. I challenge you to pull that piece of paper out and just write down where you spend all your time today, where you should be spending it, and what potential distractions can come and prevent you from actually doing that activity. That about wraps it up, family. And listen, we're just getting started, right? The Grind Season show is just now kicking off, y'all, and there's going to be so much more game that I'm going to be able to give you guys that's coming from real life experience, that's coming from things that I'm actually experiencing. I want to share those things with you so that you can continue to climb that ladder of success and build the business of your dreams. If this is beneficial for you in any way, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast channel, and look, y'all, we just getting started. We're going to keep turning it up. Just remember, y'all, the grind season is in constant motion. Let's keep on winning, family.